You may have to sign in up under your name.
Oh, is that right?
Oh no, you're spreading the gossip. Yeah,
Okay.
he said
I hadn't talked to him in a while, so I need to catch up.
yeah. I texted him yesterday, and he has a lot of stuff going on. So
I didn't get up early enough.
Is he still doing interim manager stuff? Is that what's bringing
no,
him?
he just
Okay.
he said he just got back
Here,
from the
252.
Sounds like he's in.
What time we're supposed to get together?
316. 381.
Yeah, so he's been learning surfing and
942.
got a grandbaby on the way and all sorts of great stuff.
Get the passcode.
Good for him.
The good life.
Tell you which one of his kids?
BK.
I didn't ask.
Case sensitive.
Lowercase b, lowercase k, lowercase v,
All of the information.
capital X,
Yeah, yeah.
WZ.
They used to give him
Lowercase.
Lowercase w, lowercase c.
You said Z or C?
But my app state team's no good, so I can't
Z.
really talk junk.
Yeah.
Talking to junk.
Yeah, it sounds like his team is doing really well this year.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah? I don't,
Please feel free to
I don't know about all that stuff.
Yeah.
staff,
Go heels
public outreach and the project.
and Wolfpack. I have to cheer for both.
Oh, both, okay.
And UNCC.
You got a lot of allegiances there.
Most games my team is gonna win.
Yeah, you can't go wrong.
We put 9 on the schedule. It was really not
What NC State? What the Chapel Hill? My daughter went to NC State. My son.
Yeah, all mixed up, that's right, that's right.
You're over here, Andrew. If you guys start to make trouble, I'm going to have to separate you.
It's entirely likely.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess.
Dina, how are you?
Good. How are you doing? Are you? Good, good, good.
get you some eggs. How you like it, man? What's up, buddy?
Hey. Hey, how are you?
Let's see here. What do I need? Glasses. All right, I'm leaving Tuesday. I'm coming back Sunday from Idaho. Gotcha. Okay. Yep. So I'll be gone. I mean, I'll still be available.
I'll be in Tampa at a wedding Thursday through Sunday.
Okay.
Austin's in charge. Somebody's got to be in charge.
Just to note, there's light breakfast over here, coffee over here, information.
He doesn't know how he
Major
find the right
projects in the
breakfast.
room behind. Please feel free to stop by.
phone at home. Unfortunate, since I'm here all day. But I guess the text will come through this, so that'll give me. Do they? Yeah. They don't come through yours?
I do get texts on here, but I didn't think it was the same number. How does that? I do, and I always find it very interesting because I don't seem to get them on my county file. I only get them through here.
You get texts on your phone?
Not really, because I don't use it for, like, nobody has that phone number. It's very odd. It's hard to explain, but.
Yeah, I don't know. That sounds like a job for Michael here. That's probably your refrain at this
I
point.
don't care.
There's
They
a-
find me no matter what. They hunt me down if they need me.
That's true. And many of these things will become moot soon.
They will.
Good morning. What's that? Paula's good.
Put mine down to you, and then okay.
The people who are not at the dais introduce themselves to you.
If you like. Your call.
I've never understood why MTC meeting, when televised, the camera trains on individuals, but Carpo doesn't, and it's really not good, because if you're watching Carpo from home, you have no idea who's talking for 3 hours.
Is Carpo in this room? Huh. I wonder if it's a setting on the camera then.
They told us it was like way more expensive because there's some person doing all that work and that they don't have the budget for it. The public doesn't know who's talking.
Yeah. I did not realize it was a person actually doing it. I thought the camera just.
Could sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Not there. I don't care.
Is that why they're doing the,
breakout sessions like that, and then how to go to it, they'd be like,
Every one of those that I've been in, particularly that are high-end, have really paid a lot. And I know that would get used for compared to theirs.
oh, really?
Yep.
That's what, that's good. I know, like,
I like
yeah, I like that too. And I think, yeah, it's their,
And I'm sure the mayor will be here eventually. Yeah. Okay.
Is Marcus not coming?
He will be. This is coming for the morning, and then Marcus will be here.
think that the Johnson building, people were kind of using one of those stories as, one of those floors as co-working space, so. So it makes sense.
I think he was doing something that is,
15 years ago.
Yeah.
Met a buddy of mine after work.
What's his alma mater?
trying to think of it now, it's,
It's normal that years. Because
Couldn't see.
in Virginia.
No, and where are you
I
from?
know they stopped smoking years ago.
I grew up in Missouri, but went to school in Texas.
Oh, we're in Texas.
Undergrad at Baylor and graduate school at Texas Tech.
Interesting. What was your degree?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably,
My undergrad
Wiseacre.
I haven't read it yet.
Oh, I have a more stupid undergraduate degree, don't worry.
It's an organic farm, and
I
it's
promise you.
100% worth.
Yeah, my wife and I married undergraduate at Baylor. We met at Stanford.
In Indian Trails, you go down,
And we both worked for the city.
take a look at the cakes.
Oh,
So then we moved
There's
to
you
Texas
still have to pass over the bypass and all of
and got
that.
our master's in
you didn't manage to pick up an accent while you were there.
Actually,
No, I
it's like
did not.
2
You're
blocks
steadfastly
down.
like neutral,
True,
you know,
that's true.
undetectable, like a
So,
spy.
Midwest, so
So it's right, like, that's where I work.
Do you still have
is at
family in the Midwest?
Farm.
I do.
night-
My family lives.
The other night I was there, it was leaving
I always assume
to
people don't know where
the
it is. but
roosters
it's
from
tiny.
the waterfowl.
Springfield, Missouri, which is
They didn't know what time it was. It's too
basically
early.
near Branson, Missouri. The Ozarks is the
Oh,
very
wow.
south.
Just because I watched the series, I at least know what it looks like.
Yes, so it's the very southwest part of the state.
All right, good morning. It is 9:30, and we will go ahead and get started. My name is Lee Altman, and I am a Mecklenburg County Commissioner, serving as chair of the Metropolitan Transit Commission, and we are here for a all-day budget and strategy meeting. So welcome to those in the room, welcome to the public who are watching us. We will start with introductions to my right and go around. If you will say your name and your role, and we don't have a lot of other people in the room, so let's go ahead and just, after that, have folks who are in the room tell us who they are as well. So beginning with you, please. Kelly Goforth, Chief Development Officer for CAS.
Jason Lawrence, Chief Planning Officer for CATS.
Anthony Roberts, Town Manager, Huntersville.
Brian Welch, Town Manager, Mint Hill.
Becky Hawk, Town Manager, Matthews.
John Higdon, Mayor of Matthews.
Commissioner Renee Garner, Town of Matthews.
Jamie Justice, Town Manager Davidson.
Rusty Knox, Mayor Davison, and Vice Chair of CATS.
Dina DiOrio, County Manager.
Brent Cagle, interim CEO, CATS.
Ryan Spitzer, Town Manager of Pineville.
Andrew Grant, Town Manager Cornelius.
Victoria Johnson, Chief Operating Officer for CATS.
Elizabeth Pursuti, Chief Administrative Officer for CATS.
Chad Howell, Chief Financial Officer for CATS.
Thank you, and then beginning over there.
Gary Lee, General Manager, Rail Operations.
Chris Anderson, Senior Engineer on the Silver Line Project.
Craig Fox, General Manager of Facilities for Charlotte Area Transit.
Emma Stocker, CATS Strategic Planning. Good morning, everyone. Catherine Coomer, Interim Director of Marketing Communications for CATS.
Andy Mon, CAT Senior Project Manager.
Yeah.
Morning, Jonathan Ravenel, Senior Consultant with Info Strategies.
Sharon Green, Managing Partner at MTC Strategies.
Joel Miller, City Charlotte Planning Commission.
Patrick Sari, Senior Engineer for Redline, also serving as Project Manager for Shambright Park and Ride.
Thank you. I think that's everybody, and at this time, I will turn it over to Mr. Cagle.
Yes, thank you, and good morning, everyone. So we have a great agenda planned today. Wanted to start out just welcoming all the members of the MTC and thanking the staff for pulling all of this together. Hopefully you had a chance to look at some of the project descriptions in the other room. If you haven't, they will be up all day. So please feel free to stop by. A lot of that information is similar or the same information as we would provide during our public engagement sessions. So it does give you some good information on the status of the major projects as they are today. This morning we'll focus on the CAT's current initiatives, and we'll provide a recap of the 2024 budget, a summary of where we believe we stand today in the 2025 budget, and really a look forward on major priorities as we work with the MTC beginning beginning of next year to set our 2026 budget. At lunch, we'll have lunch brought in. We also have a panel discussion planned for lunch. It will be led by Joe Bost of the Regional Business Alliance, talking about transit and some of the transit perspectives throughout the community. And then after lunch, we'll turn the corner and start talking about the transit system plan update, really talking about the regional context, the rapid transit plan projects, Better Bus, and then gathering information from this body on goals and objectives and priorities. We think that that is very important as we start to prepare both for the MTC and the public to weigh in on a transit system plan update as we start that process, really public-facing early next year in January. And then to round out the day, we have Info Strategies here, and they will be providing an update on the transit system financial model. With that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Elizabeth Prizzuti to talk through current initiatives.
Good morning, everyone. So as Brent said, I'm going to kind of walk through current initiatives and provide you some updated statistics on cats. So as you'll remember, last
Elizabeth,
year-
can you be sure to talk into the mic?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right, as you'll remember, last year we adopted a new mission, vision, core values, and outlined some strategic priorities for CATS. And so our new mission statement is moving people forward. Our vision statement is to create a seamless transit experience that improves the lives of individuals, fuels economic growth, builds a connected region, and fosters a sustainable future for all. And we live that out through our core values of safety, being employee-centric, being customer-focused, focusing on equity and inclusion, innovation, sustainability, and excellence. And through that, we outlined 5 key strategic priorities that the work that we are working through this year really focus and highlight on. And those are organizational resilience, employee success, future-forward planning and innovation, exceptional customer experience, and positive community impact. Some recent accomplishments that we've had here at CATS are that we were able to launch the Mint Hill STS Plus service a couple weeks ago as part of our Customer Appreciation and Tri-Transit Week. We also have been able to complete all the outstanding bridge inspections. We completed the purchase of the Norfolk Southern O-Line. We were able to reopen the Independence Busway, improving travel time on the 74X and our other express routes in the Independence Corridor. We've completed some upgrades with our South Park Transit Center. We've launched our eServe program. We've onboarded a new management contractor for transit management of Charlotte. We've been able to reduce our missed trips to less than 1%. And we've completed 28 bus shelter and stop improvements over the last year. So as it relates to our service, we have 4 primary service areas, those being fixed route bus, light rail and streetcar, paratransit, and van pool. On our fixed route bus service, we have 67 bus routes. Last year, we carried 8.3 million people, or provided 8.3 million trips, and we have a fleet of 235 buses and 20 battery electric buses. On our light rail service, we have 19 miles of track and 26 stations on the Blue Line and 42 train cars. We provided 5.8 million trips last year. And on the Gold Line, that is 4 miles of track, 17 stations operated by 6 train cars, and provided just over 500,000 rides last year. On paratransit, we have 5,100 eligible clients that we serve, and last year they took 185,000 trips, 196 trips, with a fleet of 85 buses. And on our van pool program, we have 26 van pools serving 118 customers who took just over 43,000 trips last year, with a fleet of 47 active vans in the fleet. So as we think about who we serve, the people we serve really, who use CATS really rely on CATS to get to where they needed to go and go about their daily lives. Over 60% of our bus riders and 60% of our rail riders use CATS to go to work or school. So they are, when you think about that, they're really going out to make money, to provide for their families, and improve their quality of life. We have 36% of our customers on the bus system and 21% of our rail customers whose employer does not allow them to work from home. And so CATS is really essential for them to be able to get to and from work. Most of our customers don't have a valid driver's license on the bus side, over half, 40% and 42% on the rail system. And then when it comes to a working vehicle, our bus customers, 71% do not have a vehicle available to them in their household, and on the rail side, 46%. And then, thinking about our transit system as a network and a system, particularly our bus customers really rely on needing to facilitate a transfer, so transferring from one bus service to another or from bus to rail in order to complete their trip. And over 60% of our customers do that on a daily basis. On the rail side, it's a little bit less at 36%. And if CATS wasn't available to them, on our bus customers, 32% would use either taxi or Uber to complete their trip, walk, or ride with someone else. On the rail side, given that they do have more working vehicles in their household, some will drive, but taxi, Uber, and walking are also how they would make that trip. And then when we think about amenities and improvements to the system, both our bus and rail customers want to see more bus shelters and benches as part of the system. And Jason will talk to that a little bit later in the presentation.
Can I ask a question? So, did you survey customers at some point in time to get this data, and when did you do that?
Last fall, and we're getting ready to do a new survey to get updated data.
And you're gonna do another survey now?
Yep, in the next couple of weeks. So we'll have that probably after the first of the year, that new data. So from a facility standpoint, we have 2 bus operations facilities. Our Davidson Street Garage was built in 1981, and our South Tryon Garage was built in 2005. Our light rail facilities, we also have 2. Our South Boulevard Vehicle Maintenance Facility, which was built with the original Blue Line, and then the 1911 North Brevard Facility, which was built as part of the Blue Line extension. We have over 3,000 bus stops in the system. 268 of them have a shelter. 367 of them have a bench. We have 43 rail stations, 4 transit centers, and 17 express park and ride lots, 11 park and ride lots on the light rail system with nearly 6,500 parking spaces. From a current initiative standpoint, as we outlined in our strategic priorities, safety and security continues to be a top priority. And over the last year, we've been able to expand the number of officers and security guards that we have out on the system on a given day. We also started working with a new contractor, which has also helped us improve our customer service and really trying to ensure a positive ride experience for our customers. And we've also been able to increase the amount of fare enforcement we're doing on the Blue Line. We've also continued with our CATS Connect program, which really works to connect resources in the community with our customers who are currently unhoused or experiencing some sort of crisis. We've also been able to sustain our ambassador program, which is a program primarily on our bus system that will work to supplement and augment the customer service for bus operators on the vehicle. So, we want our operators to focus on driving and getting everybody there safely. And so if customers have questions or need some additional support, those ambassadors can help assist them.
How many do you have? How do you choose which routes? What percentage of bus routes have an ambassador on it?
We currently, we have 12 positions. I don't think they're all filled at the moment, and we tend to put them on the routes that have the most challenges or the most amount of calls for needing supervisors or work. So it's not the same every day, and try to rotate them around. And then lastly, we've also been able to establish and enhance our rail and bus employee safety committees, and really trying to engage the whole organization around safety and improve our overall safety culture. Another strategic priority is around state of good repair, and really have been focused over the last year on improving the state of good repair of our bus fleet, our rail cars, and maintenance of way, as well as our facilities. From a bus standpoint, we have a lot of bus replacements that need to be done over the next 5 years. Over 200 fixed route buses are eligible for replacement, and all of our STS vehicles are. And I'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes on the progress that we've been able to make with that. From a rail car standpoint, really focused on getting the limited scope journal bearing replacements done on our older rail cars and the truck overhauls, as well as doing an assessment of our substations and signal houses. And from a facility standpoint, we've focused on doing an assessment of our facilities to get a better understanding of the needs of them from a maintenance standpoint, working to establish a new baseline standard of cleanliness, as well as address immediate facility maintenance needs. We are currently getting ready to start a replacement of the roof of the vehicle maintenance facility on South Boulevard. That roof is original and has been needed to be replaced for several years, so we're excited to get that work underway. And then we're also working to replace some stairwells at the stations on the southern end of the original Blue Line.
Thank you. My recollection is that there was delayed maintenance for most of the fleet, and purchasing new buses was delayed, and so that put us in a position of having to really hurry to make orders. My question is around the funds available to be replacing the fleet. Is it putting pressure on the rest of the CATS budget, or because these monies weren't expended when they should have been, you have them there to be replacing so many so quickly, if that makes sense?
Yep, and I know Chad will talk a little bit more about that with the budget, his budget presentation. We have been able to identify funding to get the bus replacements off and going. I'm not sure that they had been budgeted for before. It wasn't, or that money was still there, and so we've been able to make some progress. And I have a slide on that here in a second on what we've been able to purchase and what we have on order. And then I know we're looking to continue those replacements so that we get to a better state of good repair.
Okay. But I'll be interested to hear, is it putting pressure in places that you didn't anticipate, or is the money there to do this that you needed all along?
I don't believe it was there, and so we have
I think the short answer is we did have adequate cash reserves to be able to start to aggressively replace vehicles, both for our bus fleet and our paratransit or STS fleet, as well as expedite the journal bearing replacements or the truck overhauls. But certainly going forward, our financial capacity is constrained, and we will be looking at how we manage proper replacement and the other operating costs going forward. Mr. Howe will talk about that, but clearly our budget is fiscally constrained or will remain constrained out into the future. So we were able to do that, sort of the large expenditures that all came. Some of that was our cash reserve. Some of that was also the remainder of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, the various COVID monies that came. Those COVID monies are now expended. I believe that it is this current fiscal year when we will spend the balance of all of the CARES Act or COVID monies. And so as we move forward, we will be focusing on a proper replacement schedule and facilities maintenance, state of good repair in general terms. But there are some financial headwinds that we face and will continue to face into the future.
CATS was also successful last year in receiving a $30 million discretionary grant that also helped to augment some of our fleet replacement needs going forward too. So we have been looking at for other funds as well. So we have made great progress on getting the light rail vehicles through their required maintenance. So we have 44 truck sets between our Series 1 and 2 and Series 3 cars. The Series 1 and 2 were taken out of service due to NCDOT SSO until they had their journal bearing work done. We have 8 sets out for repair. 5 are now available for service, and 3 have completed their journal bearings, as well as some of the other overhaul maintenance that we have been scheduled to do. And so making great progress. Hope to have all the rest of the Series 1 and 2 out for repair here over the next 6 to 12 months. So. From a new vehicle standpoint, our fixed route buses and paratransit buses, we've made a lot of replacements or been able to complete a lot of replacements over the last year. We had 74 fixed route buses on order. 27 of them have been delivered. We have 47 remaining to take delivery on, that we will have that delivery complete after the beginning of the year by next spring. From a paratransit bus fleet, we have 55 new buses in service and are looking to hopefully make an order for the remaining 30 here sometime in the next year.
Question? How many of those are electric buses? And with the paratransit, are those hybrids? Or have we looked at that?
We have 20 battery electric buses currently in our fleet. We have another 15 on order. The paratransit vehicles had historically been diesel, but we have moved to a gasoline fleet. We are looking at what options are available in that fleet mix to see if there's we can move to a hybrid or a different propulsion system, but they're really short life vehicles and and they're challenging to keep up and running as it is, so we'll be continuing to explore that.
So the vehicle you see in this picture, that is one of our new vehicles. That size of vehicle, that class of chassis, we have not been able to find a full electric vehicle in that class. There are full electric vehicles that are smaller, more like a minivan style size or something like that. But that's what we're evaluating as we think about replacing the remaining 30 that need to be replaced in that fleet.
Yes, sir.
And I assume, just an assumption, we look at ridership on those buses. If 4 people riding that bus, we're not buying that bus right there, I would assume, on a regular basis.
On which bus, the paratransit or the?
Let's just say the big one, that long one. I mean, if it's riding around town with 4 people on it, hopefully we're not continuing to buy that bus there.
Yeah, so on the paratransit vehicles, we opt for the larger size because it allows you to have multiple wheelchair passengers as well as non-wheelchair passengers in the same vehicle, which can help you to make more efficient trips. Smaller vehicles, you get more limited in how many wheelchair passengers. On the large buses, we have purchased, how many did you say, Elizabeth? 30 electrics?
We'll have 35 in the fleet.
Yeah, but the 35 electrics will ultimately be in the fleet, but the rest of those buses will be hybrid buses, not full electric.
So I guess my question is, y'all continue to look at ridership on those buses, and if me and Brian and 2 of my buddies riding the bus and that's it, I guess we don't need a 50-passenger bus in that section. You continue to look at those and you may either change the routes or buy a smaller bus or whatever. I guess sometimes I see buses with no people on, I guess, and we
Yeah.
hear about that, and I'm sure that's not all the time. So a large purchase bus with 2 people riding it just doesn't make sense. It's just a
I
general
think
question.
that, and it's a fair question, microtransit will help with that. And as we think about, so we also have smaller vehicles, buses, for what we call neighborhood circulators. And those are smaller than the vehicle pictured, but they're still what most people would view as a large bus. And as we think about microtransit, I think that is how we fill the gap where you don't just have 30-foot buses with no one on board or one person on board. Microtransit helps to fill that gap.
Thank you.
But that's, I just want to pursue that a little bit more. What do you do to evaluate, on what cadence, okay, these large buses tend to only have, 5% capacity. We need to make a decision about them. Like, can you tell us what the process is to identify significantly underperforming routes to reassess if it's worth the cost?
Mr. Lawrence,
Yeah,
you
I
wanna-
mean, I think that's exactly what we're doing right now with the Better Bus effort, is to really understand where our priorities are and focus our resources where we're gaining the most value in terms of ridership. And so right now, system-wide, our bus passengers per hour are right around 16. And so that's, from a metric standpoint, is slightly better than we were performing before the pandemic, but that's largely due to the amount of frequency that we have out
boardings per hour.
out on the field. Now, I think to Mr. Roberts' question about passengers, fewer passengers on a vehicle, we are looking at microtransit, specifically on the Village Rider routes, which does have larger buses like that. And we do think microtransit will be a more suitable solution for areas that have passengers per hour around the 3 to 5 passengers per hour range. And we think the larger buses are more suited for kind of the line haul routes, our Central Avenues, Providence Roads, the express corridors. And we do that evaluation continuously.
So when would you think you'd make a decision about the microtransit? I mean, I think you're talking about being fiscally constrained, and yet, is there opportunities to implement that sooner or not save any money and sort of alleviate some of that pressure? So how does that work?
From a microtransit standpoint, we're looking at where we can put the appropriate vehicle and service type to an area, sometimes it's often lower density, but still has areas of need, and that's where microtransit really kind of fits that niche. As we look at improving the fleet, part of these newer buses are also to bring our fleet age up from where it was previously as a part of the buses that we have, that we need each and every day.
Right, so I guess my question is, when do you make the decision about microtransit? You say you're looking at it, we're looking at it, but when do we actually, what do we need to know in order to make a decision to either go forward or not?
We have made that decision. The first 3 microtransit zones roll out in February of 2025 in the northern towns. And we have identified additional zones that we will, as funding is available, we can evaluate rolling out additional zones. There are a total of 19 zones?
Yeah, 19 across the system. Yeah.
19 zones across the county. First 3, we just entered into the contract with MV Transportation, and they will provide microtransit services in the northern towns. And ultimately, not from day one, we want to understand how microtransit works, understand where it works very effectively, lessons learned. But ultimately, the idea would be that microtransit in those 3 zones will ultimately replace the neighborhood circulator in those 3 zones, which we call the Village Rider, in those northern towns. And so as we have lessons learned with those first 3 zones, we will be looking, based on our fiscal ability, our ability to afford it, to roll out microtransit across more zones across the entire county.
And that's
One-
part of the
one of-
conversation we'll have later today as we get into the system plan update.
And then one thing, as Brent mentioned, we do have a shorter version of the 40-foot bus. They come in 30 foots. The price differential, though, is shockingly small. It's less than $25,000 between the 30-foot and a 40-foot bus, because you have all of the major components on it. And so it's not always as much of a cost savings. And then it can get really, also can be challenging from a fleet standpoint management, because the way we schedule our vehicles, it can go from a Route 9 to, which is one of our busiest routes in the system, and they come to the transit center, and then they'll go and do a different route. And so you really have to plan for the capacity need for the bus all day rather than just very trip specific. And so I know it sounds a lot easier, but when you get to the overall management and scheduling of the system, it can be a little bit more complex.
I do have a question. So the electric buses, we're buying more electric buses, but how are they performing for us?
So we only have 15 more on order, and that's kind of where we're stopping, or gonna pause for the moment to kind of, so we can get a better understanding of their overall performance over a longer period of time. And, you know, realizing there's probably some additional technology enhancements that will happen over the next few years, so we aren't quite ready to be all in. They do perform well when they are in all their optimal circumstances, from, you know, the route choice, and kind of temperature and humidity and all of those sorts of things. We have had some software technology challenges that we're working through with our vendors from power management and batteries, but they seem to do well. It's just they're very, as we think about expanding, the cost of infrastructure is huge, and you know, really puts a lot of limitations on our current facilities. And so kind of continuing to expand the fleet also means kind of a big facility investment, and we need to kind of work through that ROI. Next up is we've really been able also to make a lot of progress in working with our employees here at CATS, and really working to try and create improve the culture and really put an emphasis on them. You know, they are the backbone of the system. They're the ones out there front line every day, and want to make sure that we are supporting them. And, you know, as we have listened to employees over the last year and a half, one of the things that they've really emphasized is making sure we get to a fully staffed organization. And so we've made a lot of headway with that over the last 3 years. Our current vacancy rate is 12% organization-wide. It's also 12% from a frontline staff standpoint. So that is really good. So we've been able to really focus recruitment efforts to attract candidates for our hard-to-fill positions, and doing some creative advertising and thinking about where those skill sets live in other disciplines to be able to attract them to CATS. We also have underway an organizational review, and so looking at the org chart for CATS and kind of the structure of the organization, to make recommendations to make it to ensure that we are set up the best for the future. Also, as part of that, we are completing a classification and compensation study, and hope to have those all of those recommendations by the middle or the end of next spring.
And can I just interject thank you to staff for that environment, because I've been on this board for 7 years, and the word toxic work environment was prevalent several years ago, and it's nice to see that is not the norm today. So thanks to leadership for what you've done with the environment for the employees overall.
Another thing that we heard loud and clear is the need for additional training and professional development, most of all de-escalation training. And so we did a lot of work in talking with our other transit system colleagues across the country to understand what has worked best for their systems. And as part of that, created a 5-component program for de-escalation that focuses on assault awareness, crisis intervention, resilience training, and then also providing tools just from as it relates to how operators interact with customers. And so taking even a verbal judo class to how to have a conversation when it's in a more strenuous environment. We've also focused on leadership and management training. We've had a lot of training over the last year, and some people have said it's too much, but we're trying to fulfill what they've asked for. And then lastly, we've focused on internal engagement and communication. And so we have monthly conversation station meetups where anybody can come and chat with the executive team. We have been having regular town hall meetings, as well as we send out 2 weekly communications to all staff to keep them informed on major activities within the organization, as well as just things that they need to know. Another huge focus for us is improving the customer experience, and this includes every touch point that a passenger has with us, from the service to planning their trip, purchasing tickets, boarding the vehicle, and reaching their destination. And so as we think about trying to make sure that we're creating a good customer experience, we want to make sure we're getting the word out, and that they understand the services that we have in the system and what we have to offer. We want to make sure that it's simple and easy to understand, that they can access the customer information that they need through a variety of platforms, and that they have a good ride and waiting experience. And so we have several initiatives that we have been working on to fulfill those. First is getting the word out. And I'll talk a little bit more here in a second about our strategic commitment to the community and our Cats Works for You campaign. But other initiatives that we have is just focusing on travel training and how to use the system. We now have a dedicated staff member to fulfill that, and we've gotten great reviews with that. And then even with the new Mint Hill service that we offered a couple weeks ago, or that started a couple weeks ago, we've been starting to do travel training as it relates to that. And then a couple weeks ago, we also had Customer Appreciation and Tri-Transit Week, and really tried to further highlight all of the great services we have to offer to the community. From our strategic commitment to the community is really about creating a strategic framework from which to share all of the great initiatives that we have underway and improvements that we have made to the system. And so as we think about all the things that we have been working on and have accomplished in the last year, such as new buses in the system, new shelters and benches, improved security, improvements to South Park Transit Center, our Mint Hill service, and the busway reopening, as we think about sharing those with the community, each one of those individually, while it's great, thinking about them holistically, really the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And so we wanted to create a framework from which to share that. And that is our strategic commitment to the community. And it really works to reinforce our strategic priorities, and it's built on the pillars of confidence, vision, and engagement. So those are some of the ads that we have created and messaging that we've created as part of this campaign. You'll start to see those out in market here over the next couple of months once we get past Election Day and out in kind of a paid advertising environment, but then also looking to do as much earned media and sharing amongst our own network and advertising networks as possible. Next, we've really also focused on community engagement and getting the word out through those activities. We've had transit corridor meetings with the Red and Gold Line over the last year. We've had meetings regarding bus service enhancements such as Better Bus and microtransit, and then really work to be engaged in the community with other activities such as National Night Out, other community meetings, and town halls throughout the region. As we think about simplifying the system, one of the most complex things that are parts of our system is our fare policy. It is very complicated. We have more ways you can pay for cats than I think any other transit system I've ever experienced. And so, and a lot of those different medias, some of them you can only use on bus and some of them you can only use on rail. So it's a very disjointed, and we are looking to simplify that. And so we kicked off a study last spring, or earlier this spring, to really take a deep dive at our fare policy and come up with new recommendations from a policy standpoint, but then also our fare structure. And so the first phase of this project, was our assessment of our current policy and structure, as well as establishing guiding principles. We are wrapping that up, and I'll talk about the guiding principles here in a second. The next step is evaluation, and we'll be starting to develop different fare alternatives and recommendations, modeling those recommendations, and then starting to talk with the public about what those recommendations are and how it would impact them, and work to finalize those. And then the third phase is coming up with those recommendations, how we would work to implement those, and going through the formal public comment process and Title VI fare equity analysis. And our hope is to wrap that up next year.
So can you just speak a little bit to, sort of, is there a problem that you're trying to solve for? Is it to maximize revenue? Is it to make it easier for the customer? So what's the sort of, do you think, the end game in going through all that?
Well, I think our end game is really around the principles that we've established, and first of all, simplifying the various ways that you can pay and making it easier for people to understand how to pay and what to pay. We have a variety of different mechanisms from which you can pay. We have MagStripe, we have mobile payment, we have punch cards, we have scratch off cards. I mean, we just have a lot of different fare media that are out there, and we want to simplify that, as well as, you can figuring out how to pay. So if you start out in Huntersville, depending on what type of service you're on, the Express or the Village Rider, those are two different fare categories. And then if you transfer to ride to North Lake and you transfer to another service, depending on which service you transfer to, you might have a different upcharge. And so it's complicated for anybody to decipher or maneuver throughout the system. And so our number one goal is to simplify all of that. And as part of that, hopefully grow ridership, because it's now easier to pay and easier to use the system. And I think hopefully we would want to be no harm from a revenue standpoint, and hopefully be able to grow revenue through growth and ridership.
Thank you.
A couple of our other kind of guiding principles, I spoke to the simplification and ridership, but also equity, and promoting equity and access to fair products, and really looking to minimize financial barriers and balance affordability through that. I think our fair pricing has an opportunity, and we don't have offer. It's to ride the local bus, it's just shy of $90 a month. And so, when you think about somebody who's on a very fixed income, that's a lot of money. And so we don't have any other opportunities to provide any sort of discount to folks that may have other financial barriers. And so want to take that into account as we think about that structure. And talked about kind of customer experience, and then also the employee experience. Administering fare policy and fare structure can be hard. Most of the negative interactions that occur between a driver, an operator, and a passenger are over fares, and so want to create something that's as simple as possible for them to administer and create a good experience for everyone involved.
I want to reiterate what Elizabeth said, because I think it's important, and sometimes, it's not necessarily understood. Fare collection is something that we do believe we should have fares, right? We're certainly not suggesting that we don't need fares, but fare collection and how you do it can really affect a couple things. One, safety and security of the operator. As Elizabeth said, a lot of these negative interactions, or sometimes assaults against operators, that starts at the fare box. Somebody may be short for their fare, right, or those kinds of things. So those kinds of negative interactions, not always, but oftentimes start at the fare box. The other thing about the fare box is when you have a very complicated system and a lot of different media, it affects on-time performance. Because as people, especially on very busy routes, board, there may be, someone who's literally paying in cash, someone who's got a card, but the mag stripe doesn't work, and all of those interactions push against on-time performance, which is one of the keys to having successful transit and attracting ridership. And so certainly we think fares are important, and we certainly would never advocate not having fares. But making that transaction as efficient as possible helps us for safety and security and really for on-time performance of the routes.
Thank you.
And on this subject, I still am looking to see more enforcement on the blue line, because it really does seem, I've had some young folks, young defined as mid-20s, tell me that they moved to Charlotte, they started riding the blue line, they paid, and realized that they were the only people paying, and so they stopped paying. And so we need to work on the culture of obligation and duty and, because everybody, the bus riders are definitely paying to access the bus. And I don't know if you've done any study on, or if you have any data on how much of the drop-off for compliance and paying on the blue line, but it seems really unfair that people who are riding the trains are paying at a much lower rate than people who are riding the bus. Because if you look at all the other demographics, we can see that you know where I'm going with that. So can you speak to, I know that you do have people who are intermittently on the train whose job it is to encourage compliance, but I've never seen them. I've never had anyone come up to me personally. And so I feel like we're still really missing the mark on fare collection on the light rail.
So a couple things on that. As we mentioned before, we have transitioned over to a new security contractor. We continue to do that, and we will, as they continue to staff up, you will see more fare enforcement along the blue line. And ultimately, there needs to be a fare on the gold line. As we think about the fare study, the gold line currently does not have a fare, but, and it hasn't since inception. But as we stabilize reliability on the gold line, and then as we go through the fare study, we will recommend that the gold line carry a fare. So you'll see fare enforcement, more fare enforcement on blue line and gold line. The other thing we're looking at, and we've seen this at other transit systems, is shifting over to ticket validators. And so a ticket validator, when you buy your ticket on your phone, you would then, before you board the train, there's literally a validator on the platform, and you scan your ticket, and it's validated or becomes active. So we are looking at adding ticket validators to the platforms. That will help us gauge not only the level of fare evasion that we have, but also where we see fare evasion at its highest along the line. One of the things that happened is when we went to the app, so before there was an app, people would go to the platform and buy a ticket. And we would do periodic audits of the number of people at each station who would buy a ticket compared to the number of people on the train. And that gave us, not perfect survey, but at least an idea of what the fare evasion levels were. But when we went to the app, we lost that ability because people buy it on their phone, and we don't know if somebody just walked on, do they have a ticket via their phone, even though they didn't stop at a ticket vending machine. So the validator will also help us to get a better idea of the problem. And I think it will reinforce to people that the train is not free. You need to validate your ticket when you board. And we've seen that routinely. We have an open system, so it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to do turnstiles to close the system. But even beyond that, I think ticket validators will help us to understand the nature of the problem and to focus resources where they're needed.
Is that what
is that sort of what best practices, like what you're seeing across other systems as the way to sort of combat that?
Yeah, and you can see it, not every system has ticket validators, but many do. And so when you see it, you know it immediately. Some systems have ticket validators literally on the platform. Some have ticket validators on the vehicle, but many systems do have ticket validators. And it was just a decision by CATS made in the past not to install those validators. And it wasn't just a random decision, that there is also some concern that it does slow down the process as you have to go and validate the ticket. But we don't believe that it's operationally, we think it's very minimal impact, and the value of doing it and having that information, we think it outweighs the operational side of it.
I just, oh, sorry, please.
Quick question on that. As we build these new stations, right, and expand the red line, look at all these other ones, are we going to keep an open system, or are we going to do turnstiles in these new areas?
Yes, we would keep an open system. When you have light rail at grade or streetcar, closing the stations is very difficult, if not impossible, because the alignment is open and they're at grade. Where you see closed off systems most normally is in subways, where the alignment is not accessible, generally speaking. But yes, we would look to continue an open system with the idea that we'll do more to combat fare evasion.
I'm somewhat, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I didn't realize that it had already been sort of understood that our future construction would have to be open. You know, I hope that we can develop a fair schedule that gives us the ability to do equity when we have people who cannot afford to ride. We absolutely want to support their ability to get around town. And that's something that I support the public underwriting. What I do not support the public underwriting is, you know, folks who live in South End who can absolutely afford the blue line not paying to get on it. Meanwhile, people who ride the bus do not get on the bus without paying. I got a huge problem with that. And, you know, let me be clear, I'm not trying to, you know, criminalize people who are getting on the bus, or getting on the light rail without paying. That's not a direction I'm looking to go in. However, I think people should be very clear if they're breaking a law to access a service without paying for it. I mean, I assume that is a law violation, is it?
It is a city ordinance that requires payment, so I would need to talk to our attorney about, I don't believe it's a criminal violation under like North Carolina statute. It's a city ordinance that it is a violation of.
Okay, well, you know, back when I was growing up, people littered. They threw things out of their trash out of their cars, and it was the norm. And we undertook a public service campaign to make that socially unacceptable. And people don't really do that anymore. And we need to really pivot hard with our messaging, because it's just unacceptable.
Yeah, and one of the things we have been starting to work on is a fare campaign, or payment of fares. Part of, we've been want to make sure we think about the timing of that, and that we have all of the security, we're fully staffed from, our security contractor is fully staffed to be able to support enforcement, because if we don't get, or put that messaging out, but we're not backing it up with actual action, and they see people on the train checking, you know, then that doesn't send the right message either. And so we've been working to kind of understand kind of when we'll be at a point where we can have maximum enforcement from a personnel standpoint.
Well, obviously, I don't want to precipitate confrontations when we're trying to de-escalate over a fare, but I do think that there is messaging and PSAs and a culture that we can create that could be quite a bit more robust to engage in social shaming for doing something that's really wrong.
Yeah.
And one thing to clarify, So, in a rail environment, in light rail, the operator, the passengers are separated, the operator's in the cab. So the operator is not really interacting with the customers related to fares at all, whereas on the bus, it's just the opposite. But if you were to board a CATS bus today and say, I don't have the fare, the operating instructions is to let that customer ride, not to deny them a ride. That de-escalates, that deconflicts right there. Now, if that happens over and over again, then the operator would contact a supervisor to say, we have had numerous instances of fare evasion with this person, and the supervisor would come out to address it with the customer directly. But it is not the operator's responsibility to collect fares, even on the buses as well. If someone can't pay, doesn't pay, again, the operator is to focus on operating the bus, not collecting the fare. But I do think the visual cue of the fare box right there in front of you when you board a bus is clearly a stronger indication of the need to pay and those kinds of things. So,
Thank you.
All right, great. As we talk about revenue, one of the other things we are starting to be a little bit more intentional and focused on is partnerships and working to continue to grow our transit vehicle advertising program. And so we have had, a couple of years ago, established a very robust partnership with the University of North Carolina at Charlotte in establishing an all-access pass program where all of their students, they pay us a set amount on an annual basis, and all of their students and faculty can ride CATS for free. We also have that program with the City of Charlotte and have been starting to work with several other organizations to deploy that as well. We're also continuing conversations with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools on a potential pilot with one of their high schools to provide access to students to ride CATS. And so we will have probably a couple of agreements to bring to the MTC in the next couple of months with those other programs and organizations that we have started working with.
So does the city of Charlotte pay CATS for that? How much is the city of Charlotte contributing?
It's based on the 30.
I will get you an exact dollar
Okay, yeah,
amount. I
yeah.
believe it's approximately $500,000, but let me get you an exact amount, but it is based on number of employees. And UNC Charlotte as well. So just to correct something or put a finer point on it, UNC Charlotte students get an annual pass that is not free. UNC Charlotte, the organization, pays on their behalf. So for all the total student body, they pay a set fee per student, and that gives the students the ability to access an annual all-access pass.
Right, it comes out of their student fees.
Yes.
And so, do you have any idea of what the participation is by City of Charlotte employees?
We believe participation at UNC Charlotte as well as City of Charlotte is somewhere in between 10 and 20%, somewhere around 15%, which would
Your
be.
total ridership, or of what you're paying for?
No, of so total population, if there are 8,000 employees, 10 to 15%, possibly as high as 20, are actually utilizing the pass.
But they're paying for 100% participation.
Yes.
But they pay a significantly discount, a fraction of the full annual cost of, if somebody was to go out and buy a monthly pass every month, they pay a fraction of that across the whole, for everybody, realizing not everybody will take advantage of it.
That's correct.
So,
I think going back to the statistics and the nature of ridership on rail, you note that there was a statistic on why do people ride going to work or school. It was higher on the blue line, and I suspect that that's attributable to the partnerships with UNC Charlotte.
Yeah, and one of the challenges that we've had with the program, because people look at, ridership as a measurement of success of the program, but because some of the limitations of the fare collection system, particularly on the blue line, it limits our ability to say how many people used it on any given day, because the All Access Pass program works off the mobile platform, and there's no way to account to say that I used my pass on the blue line, because they're not scanning anywhere. And so, once we're able to do that, we'll be able to get a better understanding of the overall patronage of the programs. The fact that there are no validators on the blue line really limits our ability to understand ridership patterns.
The question you asked, Betty Doster asks me about every year. And right now, we can gauge that through surveys.
Right.
With validators, we'll know.
Okay.
We'll be able to give everyone a much better answer based on the validation of tickets or passes.
So, and then lastly, just wanted to touch on our transit vehicle advertising program. We have took this program in-house. We had used a private vendor for several years, brought it in-house a couple years ago to see if we could generate more revenue, and we have been quite successful with that. The close of '24, we were just over $4 million, but that grew from by just about $2 million from the year prior. So our having a lot of success with the program, looking to find ways to partner from an advertising standpoint, but also looking at other benefits of the system. And so one of the successful partnerships that we had last year and are looking to do again this year was with Molson Coors and their New Year's Eve campaign for safe driving. They had a large advertising spend on our vehicles, but then also subsidized fares for the evening. We're also discussing partnership opportunities with the PGA Championship, which Quail Hollow will be we'll be hosting later this spring. So have had a lot of success. I'm really proud of the growth in revenue of nearly $2 million over the last year, and look to continue to grow that. That will cap out at some point because we only have so many buses and train cars to put advertising on. So we're probably getting close to our maximum, but looking for ways to partner and create other value within the system with that.
I do have a question on that. Who is responsible for vetting who can advertise on the buses and trains? I haven't necessarily seen it in Charlotte, but other communities, I've seen things like vaping products and stuff like that advertised on buses, which I don't think is good for young folks. So do we turn down some requests for maybe inappropriate advertising?
We did recently turn down some vaping advertising because it wasn't in alignment with our policy. So that is an MTC policy, is our what we can put on the vehicles, and so we do allow liquor, but we do not allow tobacco products or anything associated with that. So
What's an internal group at CATS that decides who?
well, they make a decision based on what the policy outlines.
Yeah, the MTC has set the policy. You might remember, I believe it was in the September meeting, we made a slight change to allow for the New Year's Eve safe driving.
Right.
But the folks doing the selling evaluate based on the parameters of the policy. And if
Very
it's
good.
outside of that policy, they will not sell the ad.
Great, thank you.
When was the policy last year? I can't remember. I know we voted on it. It's been a long time, but I just can't remember the last time it was reviewed.
We made a minor modification, as Brent said, in September to allow for some partnership opportunities, but we have not taken a look at it as a whole probably in a couple of years, and it will be due this year to do that.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Right. Another huge focus area is technology modernization. We talked a little bit about our fare collection technology. We have currently gone through an assessment of all of our major technology systems to understand kind of where they are in the nature of end of life and upgrade needs. Most all of them need to be touched in some way. We do have some systems end of life, and we have a lot in need of updating, which we're working through those upgrades. The ones end of life, we have a plan for their replacement, and so we'll have a heavy emphasis on that over the next 2 to 3 years. One of the things as we think about all these and upgrades and replacements of systems, we really want to create a technology environment that is more coordinated than it is today, and having better system utilization, and making sure that our staff is using the tools that we have to create an effective and efficient service that we're operating. Another focus of us is really starting to hone in on data accuracy and validity. We currently don't have any dedicated staff to that, and we'll be looking to find ways to create more dedicated staff to that, recognizing the focus on data throughout the organization. So as we look to the future, we're creating a phased action plan to work through the upgrades and replacement of systems, really working to improve integrations and flow of data of systems and identifying systems of record, and then working with our various teams to create super users and making sure that they have the training they need to operate the systems as efficient, as effective as possible, and then continuing to support our technology projects. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Jason, who's going to talk about how we're starting to use technology in service.
Thank you, Elizabeth. A big component, or a significant component of implementing microtransit is understanding the technology piece of that. Microtransit, and we touched on this a little bit earlier, is a type of transit service that's on demand. It's been deployed in numerous markets across the country, and some right in our backyard. If you look to Gastonia and places like Wilson, North Carolina, they've done significant expansions and conversion of routes to microtransit. Our approach is to take microtransit to connect to high-frequency corridors or express corridors in the case of our northern communities in Cornelius, Huntersville, and Davidson in the North Lake area. Connecting at our park and rides using smaller vehicles. So think something on the order of like a minivan or like a van style vehicle, all the way up to the cutaways that you saw, like a paratransit style vehicle. For us to get to this point to deliver this service, we advertised a request for proposals earlier this year, and through a competitive process selected MV Transit with a subcontractor called My Little Helper to do the turnkey operations of vehicle and operations. And then separately, we have another contract with Spare Labs, which will be the technology component. So Spare will be integrated within our CATS Pass app, so an individual can pay, plan, and book their trip. But also, My Little Helper will be supporting vehicle operations as well as our call center. And so an individual can call in to plan their trip. And then the thing that we feel is important to talk to our customers about is how we pay for this. We do think a good portion of our customer base will use the mobile app, but we still need to accept cash payment. And so that's something that we'll continue to do for this service. It will be operated along the Village Rider corridors, so the 97, 98, and 99 routes that serve from Davison all the way down to the North Lake community area. And it will be a phased approach. We will roll out microtransit in February of next year, and then over time, have proposed to phase out the Village Rider services and the Route 290 that operates in the town of Davidson. And during that time period, we can see how our customers that use Village Rider today adjust to the implementation of microtransit, and then we can adjust the zone boundary for microtransit services during that time period. And so there will be an overlap during that component, and there'll be significant education and outreach. As Elizabeth stated earlier, our travel training program will be a significant portion of this as we go out to the community to teach individuals how to use the app, how to plan for their trip, but also how to understand that microtransit will be a mix of stops within the app. So when you plan for your trip, it'll tell you to go to a pickup location, but we'll also have physical bus stop locations. So there'll be a significant education component to the deployment of microtransit. And this is our first zone that we'll implement, but we have many zones that will seek partnerships throughout our community, like the University Research Park is an example. And as funding is identified, we will be able to identify additional zones to deploy.
And let me ask one more question, since you talked about it being integrated into the CATS app. Will it give you direction, hypothetically, if I want to go from Davidson to, or not Davidson to Cornelius, but Davidson to the university area or something like that? Is it a both and? Is it going to give me the best choice, whether it be microtransit or actually a bus route?
Yeah, so just if you go in and plan your trip today and you say, use my location.
Right.
And then you want to go to another location, it'll show you that trip chain of that you have to take, walk or drive to. So and that'll be a piece as we work with the app developer to refine that so that it accurately represents addresses, particularly within the microtransit zone. Okay, go to the next slide. As a part of that overall adoption of Envision My Ride back in May of 2022, we had the microtransit was a big component of that, but also coming out of that effort was an identification of a need to prioritize bus stop improvements and develop a capital plan strategy around that. So through that effort, we presented to the MTC to update and adopt our transit service guidelines policy to give us a greater granularity to understand how to make improvements to our bus stops. Prior to the adoption of that plan, we focused solely on ridership. We're now looking at a more nuanced approach of how long a person is waiting at a bus stop. Is it a transfer location? To develop a scoring system for all of our bus stops. And then through that analysis, we recommended a number of improvements, and we're moving through those in batches. As Elizabeth stated earlier, we have 28 that have been approved thus far. We have another batch of improvements that will come after that as we move through design. But we are limited with our ability to deploy a large amount of shelters or stop improvements based upon our existing funding. But we are looking at grants and partnerships to expand upon that program. Throughout this year and next, we'll be looking at our bus stops in total to consolidate bus stops to locations that are more appropriate for higher ridership locations, but also to accommodate existing infrastructure in the towns as well within the city of Charlotte. Later this year, you'll start to see public art in our shelters that have been deployed, like the example there that you see in the town of Matthews. And we have been working with the community similar to Adopt a Street. You see those signs throughout Mecklenburg County and the city of Charlotte. We have an Adopt a Stop program where individuals can adopt a stop and help us in beautifying the stop locations in their community. And then we're looking to deploy QR code at bus stops so people can scan with their phone real-time information for services to their stop.
Do you have a map of where, the bus stop capital plan, does that include new shelters?
It's a mixture of new shelters, but also replacement and benches and waiting pads and everything at the stop.
So do you have a map of where the new bus stop shelters are going to be? Because I've heard from my colleagues around the table that it's really hard for them to get shelters and benches at bus stops in the town. So is there a map of what that looks like? And is there an ability to sort of weigh in on getting additional bus stops or additional shelters and benches in spots outside of the city of Charlotte?
Sure, and we were very conscious with the coordination of developing that plan and worked with each staff through each town to identify locations in our first batch. So as we move forward, we've identified locations in each of the jurisdictions, so it's not all just the city of Charlotte. And a map can be provided for that.
But what you're saying is that for each town, you made a priority in consultation with them?
Correct.
Okay.
And in fact, some of the towns, we have monthly calls to go through those stops. We've had to, each one of these stops is unique. So as you go through the process, a good example is the town of Davidson. We want to put a stop in the shelter in front of Ada Jenkins Center, but there was a concern of impacting a significant tree that was there. So as we work with them, we identified a different location, but had to start our design process over again. So it's just each one is unique, but we are working with the towns to define that program.
And Jason, maybe talk a little bit, the MTC did approve a methodology for how to, sort of a matrix for how to establish priorities for shelters that does take into account the entire region, not just sort of utilization of the bus routes. It takes into account the entire region to ensure that there's better equity across all of our service area, rather than just every stop or shelter or bench going into Charlotte, the city of Charlotte. But that has been taken into account in the methodology as well.
Yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
relatively new.
Yeah, prior to, I would say, June, July of last year, the prior policy stated 25 or more boardings has a shelter. I think it was like 12 or 15 for a bench. And over the course of 20 years, there's only a handful of stops that reach that threshold. And so we came up with another method. It looked like how long a person is waiting. Is it a transfer point? Is it near an affordable housing location, or is it near educational institutions or medical locations? And put that into a scoring matrix to identify priorities. And so I think that has helped us spread those improvements and identify locations throughout the county.
So I was just going to ask, I know you talked about consolidating, if I could talk. I know there are some signs out in the middle of like a grass field somewhere, you know, and I don't know if anybody ever even, I don't see a worn out spot, so I doubt anybody ever rides a bus. So I assume as part of that consolidation, you know, you've worked with staff to consolidate for the appropriate spaces, you'll rip those signs up in those areas that are in a grass field somewhere, and I assume that's what you're proposing to do.
Absolutely. And the first good example of that work will be with the deployment of microtransit. You know, a good example is in the town of Huntersville. If you ride a Village Rider today, it's going to drop you off on Sanford Road, but your destination is Burkdale. And so we'll work to identify those locations to put stops where people want to go. And then we would remove that stop on Sanford that has no sidewalk or good accessibility. And so that'll be a really good example of that.
Thank you.
And one of the new shelters that we've recently installed is in Matthews, and that's the picture there too, so.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll hand it over to Kelly to talk about our ongoing initiatives.
Good morning. I'm going to touch on two of our major projects that are currently in implementation. And the first one is the Hambright Park and Ride lot located in the town of Huntersville. The Park and Ride will have 450 parking spaces, an operator break room, mobility hub features that allow for carpool and van pool, as well as bus access. This project was funded primarily through CMAQ funds, and it is being built on land donated by NCDOT. This past year, we also worked with the adjacent developer to build the access road that will benefit both the Park and Ride customers and the development. And this Park and Ride will be accessed by express buses using the I-77 Express Lane Direct Connect. We've made significant progress on this project the past year. We've completed 65% design, and construction is expected to begin in 2025 and open in late 2026.
One second, Ms. Goforth. Yes,
I
Anthony?
was just going to tell Brent and the staff, thank you for working on that. That was complicated. There were a whole lot of people involved, a lot of different funds involved, and so appreciate that. I did have one question, so thank you again. I know it's complicated, probably a whole lot of maintenance issues. Have we ever thought, I'm sure we have, public restrooms at some of these places? I'm sure that's complicated, costs money, but, you know, you're talking potentially 450 parking spaces, and I'd imagine some folks may have to use the restroom every now and then at, you know, those places. That process have been thought about, and, you know, why not? I understand the maintenance, I understand it's complicated, just like we have restrooms in parks. So just a question.
I think the thought, and we'll have restrooms for our operators, but I think the thought is that since this is commuter focused, people are coming and parking for their commutes and timing it for the express bus arrival or for carpool arrival. So there's not a high demand for people to use restrooms at park and ride lots. So I think that's how we made that decision in the past.
Okay, thank you.
The second project to highlight is the new infill station along the Blue Line between the New Bern and East-West stations. This project was funded with savings from the Blue Line Extension Project as well as private contributions. We reached some major milestones on this project in 2024. 30% design has been completed, and we're scheduled to have the 65% design submittal in November. We've also selected the project delivery method, which will be construction manager at risk, and we have selected the contractor through a competitive request for proposal process. The construction manager at risk method will allow us to bring on the construction contractor during final design, allowing us to partner on some of the final implementation plans and the construction phasing. And then we'll negotiate a guaranteed maximum price with the contractor during final design. Other activities underway include selecting the station artist, coordinating with property owners for construction access, and we're also planning some community meetings in November. In terms of the overall schedule for this project, the schedule has pushed out a little bit, and that's primarily due to long lead item procurements, special track work needed to install a double crossover in this area. And that crossover is going to allow us to maintain operations during construction as well as give us long-term operational flexibility. So right now, our projected opening is 2028. So just to highlight a few other bus and rail capital projects that are also underway. Here on just listing a few of them, we've already talked about the opening of the Independence Busway in August. And we're also making progress on a number of our ADA improvements, including bus pads. You know, we talk about installation of shelters, and part of that is ensuring that we have ADA compliant bus pads at all those locations. So we have installed a number, and we have a number in progress as well. We're also making improvements at the South Park Community Transit Center, and we have a condition assessment underway of the CTC to determine some immediate improvements there that would benefit both our customers as well as our employees. We have 3 operator comfort stations planned, and design is underway with those, and we expect construction to start next year. And we also have a major drainage improvement project that we have recently awarded a construction contract for, and that will begin shortly. That's along the Blue Line. And finally, as Elizabeth mentioned, we've completed a major milestone with completion of all the bridge inspections. It's taken 18 months to get all of those done. We had no major findings, but we will be completing some minor repairs over the next year on those projects, on those bridges. And so with that, I think we're going to take a short break before the budget meeting. Okay,
Actually,
go ahead.
just because we are already behind schedule, I would invite anyone who would like to take a restroom break or food to feel free to stand up at your convenience. But if we can continue with our presentation, so we can get everyone out on time at the end of the day. And I will say, further to the goal of not slowing things down, I want to hear a lot more about the CTC. If you're going to be doing that later, then I don't have to ask that question now.
Yeah, we can talk about the CTC.
Is now the right
now.
moment? So where is it? What was the original schedule? The CTC, what was the original goal for moving forward? Where is it now? What's happening?
Yeah, I think, as last reported to the MTC last year, we saw some projected cost increases from the developer. It was intended to be a private-public partnership with the developer, as well as some roadblocks in acquiring the parcel on the adjacent to the CTC needed for the access road. And so, we've been continuing to have conversations with the developer, trying to advance that project. But right now, we're kind of in a point where we haven't been able to move forward yet. So that's why we are proposing to do some kind of short-term improvements to really address the immediate needs there.
What are those short-term improvements you're proposing?
So we're doing we've hired an architectural firm to do a complete condition assessment of the CTC, so we understand all of the needs. This is part of our regular program where we evaluate the, condition, assess it from, a scale of 1 to 5 in terms of what's priorities. And then out of that process, we'll develop a program of improvements, and we'll share that when we have that information early next year.
Well, I think that's excellent and hope it gets expedited. Does the 1 cent sales tax, any of that, how does all of that factor into this, if at all?
For this initial work, making these, they're meaningful improvements, but they're minor, right? This is not a complete rebuild of the facility. I would say that the 1 cent sales tax, we will need to start having conversations about ultimately the future of the CTC from a new facility standpoint as we start to talk through the possibility of new revenues.
And is now the time for me to ask a related question about Gateway, or should I do that later?
We can talk about that now.
So what's the status of that? Same thing, like when was it supposed to be breaking ground? When, I know some work has been done, but it seems like nothing's really happening there.
Yeah, well, we've been working with the developer that was selected, Charlotte Gateway Partners, on development of the conceptual design, and they have recently completed that design and developed some cost estimates. So right now, we're working with the state as well as the developer to review those plans and make a determination on how we're going to move forward with that, because we have to develop a funding plan for the project, and so that's really the next step.
So is that project then, how far behind schedule is Gateway Station?
We can come back and give you an
Yeah,
answer
let
on
me-
that.
let me-
I am not sure
I
from
can look
whatever
at
was
that
said
originally, yeah.
initially, but certainly whatever the initial project schedule is will not be met. But we continue to work closely with the developer and DOT on the design to really understand cost allocations and finalize design so that we can keep that project moving forward.
And on the CTC, you didn't say this, but I'm going to say it. Is the project dead as we know it?
We did not say that.
I know you didn't say it, but I feel like you implied it, so I'm just going to ask the question. But it sounds like there's some challenges that may not be able to be solved. So,
We continue to work with the developer, and we are cautiously optimistic that we can find a path forward, but at this point, we have not identified with the developer a path forward, and so rather than continue to leave the current CTC in the state that it is, it's time to put some reinvestment into the current facility. I think when I started 2 years ago, I think the common logic was, well, we're 2 years away from demoing the building, and so we don't want to put a lot of it. I would say we're not sure how far away from that facility, from the next facility. And so we do believe it's time to make some reinvestments in the current facility.
Is that lipstick on a pig, or is it more than that?
I wouldn't say it's lipstick on a pig, but it is not changing the basic structural elements or layout of the facility. It is, as example, I think things that will score highly on the assessment are restrooms, break rooms, customer areas in the food court, furnishings, lighting. There's also technology needs. And so it's not a full rehabilitation or a reworking of the facility, but it's certainly very necessary, and I think it will be meaningful improvements for our customers and our operators, because a vast majority of our operators, when they take breaks, they do that at the CTC. It's a very busy facility from an operator and customer standpoint, and this will It's not a long-term solution, but it will certainly vastly improve what we have today.
So I have another question about that, actually related to Commissioner Altman's question, which is, when we start to, when we get our 1 cent sales tax, because I feel strongly that we will be successful, but, modeling these projects, I mean, is this part of the financial modeling? Because if we're gonna need this funding to be able to go to that, what's the impact on the other projects that we've been talking about? That would, the 1 cent sales tax would be used for, these transit lines and other things. So, I mean, is that?
Very good question, and as we work through the updating and, I guess, for lack of a better term, fine-tuning the financial model, yes, I believe we do need to have discussions about both the projects and costs that are already in the model, but also projects and costs that maybe are not in
Right.
the model.
Yeah.
And yes, the CTC
Absolutely.
would be a good example,
And potentially Gateway as well? Or-
possibly.
Okay. Well, I think we all need to know that now. I mean,
Yes.
that's gonna be part of the analysis as we move forward.
Yes.
I'm not clear that the bones of the CTC are bad. The structure, the layout there. I'm really sort of interested in, one could call it lipstick on a pig. But one could call it, if the bones are good and the layout is good, it might be a good use of taxpayer money to repaint it and refresh it and make it a pleasant, beautiful place, because there's lots of sunshine there, and, there's lots of positive attributes that we were gonna lose with the plan that had been proposed. So I think I actually see this as possibly a good development that could save us a whole lot of money, because, and you might tell me why this is not feasible, but it certainly seems like, to have the CTC not where Gateway is never made a lot of sense to me. So as we look at our big planning, to have these things maybe in the same place, or to look again about how we use our limited resources to get maximum connectivity and efficiency, I'm very interested in that conversation. All right, so I think we will now pivot to our CATS budget update. If that speaker is now ready.
Yes, Mr. Howell is ready. We do have a panel at around 11:30, so we will try to move through this quickly, but if we need to suspend the conversation and this presentation and then come back to it after the panel conversation, absolutely happy to do that.
Thank you, Brent. Good morning, Commission members. I'll endeavor to move quickly. This morning, I'm presenting a brief overview of not just one, but 3 fiscal years. And I'll start with FY '24 and work to FY '26. Going back to what was mentioned briefly earlier about the buses, I think I think that's a great segue into looking at FY '24 from both our operating and capital standpoint. So how were we able to replace 75 buses that run around $1 million each? And you'll see this when we get to the capital, about $44 million of that's all local dollars. That's what we haven't spent it all yet, but that's what's programmed to fund as we procure these buses. We were able to use, or plan to use, that much from our fund balance, which were healthy at the time and did help with that. We were also received a competitive grant that helped with a piece of that, and we were also able to realign or use some existing grants. There's certain grants that we get every year. We were able to realign or use those as part of that as well, but each of those have a match, local match. So those local dollars went to assist those federal dollars. But in broadly, that's how we were able to do it. So FY '24, as we move through that, these are unaudited numbers. We continue to work with city finance to finalize our operating and capital budgets, and once those are finalized and the audit is complete, we will come back to the MTC and present those. Start with our revenues. I'll take us through our revenues, operating revenues and operating expenses, and then capital revenues and capital expenses. Our total revenues were $268.1 million, we did exceed our budget by about $15 million. Primarily, that's because we did slightly over-collect, not by a lot on the sales tax, but also we were able to, the CATS finance team has done an outstanding job working with the other divisions to be able to utilize and bring down a lot of these prior year grant monies that were there. And so we did over-collect, if you want to say that, or collect more than we had budgeted on federal monies. Now, we can't do that every year, but we were able to do that last year. And that's something that we will continue into FY '25 and into FY '26 to maximize the dollars that we have received. Sales tax income, or sales tax revenues amounts to about 58% of our total revenues. Federal and state grants is 20%. The MOE that comes from the city and the county and Huntersville is about 12%. The total of those three is 90%. The final piece there I'll mention is fares, and you'll see this consistently. You'll see this as we move into 2025 is only about 5%. I say only about 5%. They're about 5% of our total revenue stream. Next. Switching to the expense side, heavily focused again on operations, personal services and operations. We touched on some of these items in the previous slides. Of course, our recruit and retain efforts have led to an increased personal services budget, which we've been able to absorb within our funding stream. Operating, again, focused primarily here on maintenance and ensuring that our operating divisions had the necessary resources to assist our riders. And we ended up here with approximately a $9 million savings. So think of that as $23 million difference there. I'll touch on kind of what that does overall as I wrap up 24. Another way of looking at our budget is I'll break this very simple. About 75% of our actual expenses on the operating side cover four things: personal services, maintenance of all of our equipment and facilities, safety and security across all of our different operations, and our fuel expenses across all of our operations. Switching over to the capital side, so here's that. So what the gray is, of course, the adopted budget. The blue is what we actually spent, so it's cash flow basis when you get to the capital plan. And so we plan to spend so there's that $44 million that I talked about that we had intentionally budgeted from our reserves. That's not to say that we won't spend it. We just didn't spend it during this fiscal year. It's still there to spend as we continue to receive new buses in. And it's not all necessarily buses, but other items. And so that's where we ended up on the revenue side. On the expense side, and you'll see here, ties back, right, the BOD expenses there. A lot of that is toward the buses that have come in and to the other items that have been referenced throughout the presentation earlier: technology, work on our facilities, the development work that's continuing. We'll touch on that later on the overall plan. Okay. And so what does that mean? Looking across all of our funds, our preliminary expectations is that we will have a slight overall decrease in our fund balance, right? So we contributed some because we had some savings and we had additional revenues, but we still had that $44 million draw that we're going to need on the capital side. So we still think when all that end, and we're waiting to hear back from city finance on the final numbers, but we still think we'll have a slight decrease in our overall fund balance, but that will still be in compliance with the MTC's financial policy, MTC 01. Moving into 2025, we have closed the first quarter, and we've used that as well as historical analysis and ongoing discussions with divisions to calculate what we think would be there for our second through fourth quarters. And based on that analysis, here's where we think we'll be at year end. Of course, early on, please don't hold me to these numbers. They're the best ones we have at this time, but I know many folks in here know how quickly budget numbers can change. So revenue stream, very similar to what we saw in 2024. Increased sales tax, that is within the planned increase that we see year to year. We think we'll recover slightly more than that. grants, interlocal agreements. Again, planning to do everything that we can to recover everything that is, that we can, either from prior year existing grants or new grants as they come in. Maintenance of effort, about the same. Again, passenger fares, so sales tax, grants, and maintenance of effort is about 86% of our total revenue stream coming in, with passenger fares, again, amounting to about 5% of the total. On the expense side, again, you're seeing on the personal services side, you should not see that huge differential between what we budgeted and what we spent, because we were able to fully capture a lot of those recruit and retain efforts that we did in '24 as we moved into '25. And so we don't anticipate there being that much more dramatic of a change. We're hoping as we shift again into 2026, we don't have numbers on that yet, that again, you would not see a dramatic increase in those, because we've captured most of the change in 2025. And again, between personal services and just our operating expenses is about 89% of our total operating budget. Broken record here, very similar to '24. About 72%, vice 75% of our projected expenditures are in the same four categories: personal services, maintenance, safety and security, and fuel. This is our amortization schedule. Again, we're planning to spend in 2025 and 2026 about $18.1 million. And again, this is based on the COPS that we have currently issued. This is not assuming any new debt issuance at this time, with the final payment coming due in 2048. We talked about, so this is the adopted budget. So this is our 25 adopted budget, and then 26 through 29 capital budgets that were presented. We're in the process now of updating these. Of course, it's a moving five-year budget. So 26 is being evaluated again, even though we've got numbers here, 27, 8, 9, and also now we're adding 2030. So that's what the budget team is putting together right now. But, and you'll see this as we shift into talking about 26 a little bit. There's going to be some choices that we're going to have to make as far as, what we do, particularly on the capital side, moving forward, because we are going to be in a fiscally constrained environment. We have been and will continue to be. And I know last year we presented to this group, the options that we had for both the operating and the capital program, and we're anticipating doing that again. But there will be some hard choices that we'll have to make as far as the projects that may be presented to us and those that we are able to actually advance until we have an additional revenue stream. So.
I have a quick question. So when I'm looking at your debt service schedule, obviously it looks like your debt service remains flat, so for the foreseeable future. But when you start to look at your capital plan, for 26 and going outward, obviously there's some big numbers there. Where do you anticipate issuing new debt, and what does the debt service projection look like, or do you always try to keep your debt service flat?
That's a good question. And again, that's part of the hard choices that we're going to have to look at, right? So when you get into, without getting too much in the weeds, the debt issuance vehicle that's available to us, of course, is COPS, and that's the easiest one that's available with the way that we're structured. The easiest way to align COPS with something is to maybe align them with buses. This is just Chad talking, but it's this is the way that CATS has done it in the past. And so it's conceivable that moving forward, when you look at the Carolina, I'll say Carolina Blue there, for the Tar Heel fans in the room, it's possible that some of those expenses may be something that we come back to this board to talk about and consider issuing new COPS for. But that's something that will be evaluated into '26 and into '27. And so I think it could be as early as '26, but again, that's a decision. We're collecting that information now. It may be '26 or '27 before we would issue new debt, or that may be something that, again, can be pushed out based on the likelihood of the additional sales tax.
So how much, so you have a debt service reserve, right? And so how much is in that, and how much capacity do you have to issue new debt?
What I've looked at, the amount that I've looked at there, I think I can answer it this way. When I've looked at it and I reviewed it with city finance, we have not gone into that level of detail. We could issue roughly around 20 to 25 million a year for the next few years if we had to, without exceeding our ability to do that, but we've not made that decision yet. It would line up kind of nicely with the amount of, and not coincidentally with the amount of the buses that we may have to buy, but we've not made that as a firm decision yet.
So is the MTC going to be asked to approve the FY '26 capital plan?
Yes.
And is there going to be a accompanying financial conversation around what that means in terms of additional debt service and the impact on the budget?
Yes.
And when will that happen?
Yes,
That'll happen
absolutely.
in this budget cycle?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. If we choose to go that way, again, right now, we are compiling the FY '26 through FY '30 capital budget. And so if as part of that process, we feel like we couldn't defer something and that would need an issuance in '26, yes, of course.
I don't understand how we have these projections when we haven't adopted a capital plan, and when we're actually on the cusp of making some really big choices that, could radically change whatever's on this slide. Like, I'm not clear how this even was generated.
So, yeah, let me clarify. The only numbers on here that have been really adopted are the FY '25 numbers. The others are planning numbers, and the city submits a 5-year rolling plan. The only numbers here that are adopted that we're working toward right now are 2025.
Okay, so everything except the most left column should sort of be grayed out as hypothetical, right? Because we haven't actually adopted it, and we don't even know what our resources are going to be, because we're in the midst of trying to get more resources.
Absolutely.
So I'm not going to really put a lot of investment in the right 4 columns, because they seem so hypothetical as to be probably not helpful right now.
I guess the clarification I would give is that they are planning numbers, but they are not hypothetical. These would be based on what we believe are the needs over the next 5 years for things like bus replacements or other capital reinvestment, not for future projects, but for maintaining state of good repair of the system and that we have today. And so while they are planning, they don't reflect the red line or the gold line phase 3 or the silver line or some of the items that are included in Better Bus. They don't reflect any of that, but they do reflect current thinking on future capital needs to properly maintain and reinvest in the existing system that we have today.
Okay, so it's the current half-cent sales tax steady state. That's what this is.
That is a perfect way to say it.
Okay. All right.
Yes. And to your approach, yes, you could certainly gray them out, or they could certainly be a lighter shade or some other way to visualize it, and they would be classified as adopted, planning. And we will be revisiting those and are revisiting those right now. Shifting into FY '26, we've kind of covered some of that, where we are now. CATS Finance has had our kickoff, and the team is busily meeting even today, certainly this week, with the divisions as we compile the budget. So part of the process is we present to them what has currently been adopted, and then they work with us about, what their needs are going forward. And that is both from an operating and a capital perspective. And so that's the phase that we are in now. When we move into 26, so where are we starting from? You know, our working, I'll call it our CAT's working draft budget, right? Because what we're really doing is working to consolidate and put a product together that we can bring in front of the MTC in January, right? And then there'll be a process from January on to adoption. So what we're doing is building the bones, if you wanted to call it that, of the budget. And so CAT's working draft budget will align with our mission, vision, and values, which Elizabeth talked about at the beginning of the presentation. And right now we're planning for it to be a continuation of our FY25 strategic priorities. So that's where we're starting as we advance forward. We touched on a few of these too. Our budget's gonna be fiscally constrained, right? So where we're starting with, there will be some sales tax growth in there, but it will not be the new additional sales tax, right? We're not assuming any brand-new funding streams coming in or any major ones at this point. Another thing to note is that the 25 budget, with the 25 budget, now there'll be some monies that continue into 26. The bulk of the COVID grant funds, particularly on the operating side, will have been spent and reimbursed. Now, that is not some of the monies that were set aside for the LRV midlife and items like that. Those will continue into the future. Those don't have an end date, but we also are just now getting into that process of where we can draw those. So those funds aren't ending, or we haven't drawn them yet. But a lot of the operating focused grants we have drawn, and so we will be using different grants to fund that, but that's part of our financial constraints. Of course, any budget that we present to the MTC and carry forward into adoption, what staff will present will comply with the financial policy MTC 01, both from our fund balance safeguards and from our financial metrics. What you will see also, not just will we continue with at least what staff is putting together, will continue with our 25 priorities into 26, but it will also be a status quo budget. And so we're defining that as, we're not saying that there can't be some improvements to service, but for there to be improvements in service, we're gonna have to look at, how can we do things how can we generate some savings that would allow us to make those gains, efficiency gains.
I have a quick question actually about this. So I agree with you completely. I think our team is also saying that sales tax growth is going to be very small or almost non-existent, so we're a little concerned about that. But remind me, did you guys, when you settled the new contract with your bus operators, were there significant salary increases in that? And is that something that is of concern in terms of the next year's budget in light of the fact that sales tax is going to be so constrained?
So again, when we did the new contract, so separate from the new contract, even under the old contract with RATP Dev, bus operators and mechanics are unionized and they have a collective bargaining agreement. That CBA was entered into approximately a year ago, I believe. I'll get you the exact date when it was finally ratified or entered into. And it did have, on average, across all the driver operator pay scales, had on average about a 12% increase in wage. So obviously that does affect us, but it is the direct, it is a direct contributor to how we have been able to stabilize service. So that contract has already gone up associated with that and will continue to go up based on inflationary increases. And yes, we are concerned in general about the budget and the rate of growth of the cost of salaries of all of our contracts compared to the rate of growth of Article 43 sales tax revenues. Basically, when we say fiscally constrained and status quo, what we're trying to say is, at this point, our projections show that we can continue to afford doing what we do today. We cannot make service increases from where we are today given the current revenue streams.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Question on the microtransit. I know you talked about, I guess a company is providing that service. I would assume and hope that that is not unionized?
That is correct. It is not.
Perfect.
I'll kind of end this before I move to next steps here, and just say, and we already touched on this when we looked at the capital side, right? The capital slide. Going forward, we're going to be, and Brent mentioned this as well, prioritizing state of good repair and funding of ongoing capital projects. So continuing to fund what we're already working on to get those to where they are planned to be in relation to whether it's a new sales tax coming in or future funding that's not there yet.
So just as a reminder, before we leave this slide, and maybe here it is a little clearer, the MTC over, from basically January, February, March, April, possibly even May, we will start to populate real numbers as recommended budget for FY26. And the MTC will be asked to approve 3 separate budgets: the operating budget, the capital budget, and the debt service budget. If there was a recommendation to use COPS, for example, in FY26 for buses, for bus replacement, then that would be presented to the MTC as part of both the capital and the debt service budget for consideration.
Got a question. What is COPS?
I apologize. Certificates of participation. It is a debt financing tool that CATS utilizes. In fact, it is the only debt financing tool, I believe, available to us other than some federal programs.
So it's a bond, but it's not backed by the full faith and credit of the city of Charlotte. It's backed by assets that you have in the,
That's correct.
it's not voted.
We do not currently have the legal authority to issue revenue bonds, which would be backed by the revenue streams. That may be something that is possible if a new sales tax were approved. But currently, we do not have that ability.
Did you go over and you may have mentioned this earlier, or maybe we're gonna mention it later, how much over on the I'm gonna call them the safeguard accounts, the unrestricted fund balance over, was it 100 million and then the 30 million? Do you know, or can you tell us how much we have in those accounts?
Well, I have asked, again, City Finance helps us calculate that as part of the annual financial report. Right now, the projections are that we're well above the 100, which has to be in one, and the 30 that has to be in the revenue reserve. We'll be well in advance of those, but final numbers for '24, I don't have.
In January, we'll have the audited statements, and we'll present that. It usually takes till middle of December, beginning of January to get the final audited statement, and then we'll be able to tell you definitively. It is above the minimums, but it's, to an earlier point, it has been shrinking because of the large capital expenditures that we've had over the last 2 years.
And how are those minimums established? Is it policy of the city, or is it law, or?
The 100 and the 30 are both in MTC 01, so they were formalized as part of that by the MTC.
Is that a flat dollar amount, or is it a percentage of something?
There's several different
Dollar amount?
criteria that's in there.
The 130 is a flat dollar amount, and generally speaking, how it would work, because at some point, especially if we were talking about additional revenues, which would mean additional projects, that number will go up. And generally speaking, what happens is our financial advisor will basically say, given the debt loads that you're talking about or the programs that you're talking about, they will make a recommendation on reserve amounts. And so the 130 was a recommendation of the financial advisor, and it has not changed, primarily because we haven't had any very large debt issuances over the last few years.
I don't remember voting on that, and it just seems like for a fixed number to be the metric and not a percentage is just, we're just waiting to sort of sleepwalk our way into an inflationary environment where we don't have enough money on hand. Can we come forward with that policy at a future meeting and just revisit that?
Yeah, that would be fine. And remember,
I think those,
a lot of it is driven by the amount of debt service that you pay, which is known in advance, right? And so as long as the debt service, the debt load and the debt service doesn't change, the reserve should be fine.
those policies were adopted, I think, even before, a long time ago, I've been on 20-some years, so,
They were last updated in
before.
2016.
yeah, long time, 2016.
Yeah.
Last updated, yeah, they were last revisited in 2016, I believe.
And it was, I think we originally started out with 100, and then we came with the second policy of the 30.
That's right.
And so it dates back a long time ago, but I know those questions have been asked. I've been asking before, why the 100? You know, can we dip into it even below that? And obviously, it's based on some of your debt models and your financial advisors, et cetera.
Yeah, we're happy to, we'll pull all of that together, give you an answer on how much above the minimums we have, but also provide you some more information on the thinking around how they were set and those kinds of things. But again, because we generally do level debt service, the debt payments are stable, and the $130 million is really designed to guard against, to ensure that the investors who've bought that debt get paid every year, that we make our payments on debt service, and also then to guard against fluctuations in sales tax associated with operating expenses, the fluctuations that may occur between operating expenses and revenues. Sometimes those don't align. Revenues can decrease sooner, faster, or at different points than operating expense.
Thank you.
We've kind of already touched on this. I can summarize this slide by we are currently preparing, building a budget to bring before, building a draft budget to bring before the MTC in January. And then from January on, as Brent said, April or into May will be both, work sessions, review sessions, and then ultimately adoption of both the operating, the debt service, and the capital budget for 26 through 2030. And thank you for your time this morning.
Okay, thank you. Like to welcome two folks who joined us.
Thank you so much.
Please introduce yourself.
I, Lyles, Mayor Charlotte.
And Ms. Go forth.
Ms. Babson,
I'm sorry.
Assistant City Manager, City of Charlotte.
Thank you. All right, so it is now 11:30. Should we take a 5-minute break, just like one stand up real fast while people get their plates?
Yeah, and so I apologize, I was off a little bit. The speaker should be here in the next 20 to 30 minutes, about noon. So we do have a bit of a break to give folks time to grab lunch and check emails and those kinds of things.
Thank you.
Lunch is in the other room.
Yes,
behind us.
lunch is just behind us, in the room just behind us.
Is he killing that?
Yeah,